Well, hello to everyone who is logging in. We're just going to give it just a couple of minutes to let everybody tune in, and then we'll get started in just a second. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to spend the next 45 minutes introducing a new regional opportunity to strengthen education to workforce data partnerships across the North and Eastern states. Uh, Really, today's conversation has two big purposes. First, we want to introduce the Ascendium-funded initiative that supports states in expanding their capacity to answer important education to workforce questions using administrative data. And second, we also want to preview the Eastern States Summit, where many of these conversations will start or continue in person this upcoming September. Uh, Today's webinar is going to be hosted by myself. I'm Allison Espandola, the State Program Officer here at Coleridge, and I'm joined with Charles McGrew, the Vice President of State Data Initiatives and Partnerships here at Coleridge. And we're really looking forward to sharing some more information with you today. And we do encourage you all to share thoughts, questions, chat, put it in that chat throughout our discussion today, so that we hear your voices and we hear what's on your minds, so that we can make sure that while we're talking and sharing throughout today, that we really respond to what's top of mind for you all. So with that, I do want to jump into some of our objectives today. We have a few goals. Obviously, we want to share the vision for this regional initiative and explain what it would look like if you were to participate in it. But also really highlight how this initiative is meant to complement your existing state efforts and support you rather than adding anything to your plate. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, exploring and previewing the Eastern States Summit that's coming up in September. And then we do want to leave plenty of room for questions and discussion towards the end. So before discussing the initiative itself, it is worth stepping back a little bit to consider why this work is on the forefront of our minds and Ascendium Education Foundation's mind, and why it's becoming really an increasingly important conversation beyond just state borders. So I do want to turn it over to Charles, who's going to talk a little bit about, why this cross-state data matters and why this discussion is important. So Charles, take it away.
All right, thanks, Allison, and thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate it. I know everybody's busy and we have a lot going on, but I do think this is a really good opportunity, and I hope that the information we provide is useful. First question is, in terms of why cross-state data matters, the focus of this project is really initially looking at the states in the Northeast sector of the United States. And the main reason that why cross-state matters is that while many states have strong longitudinal data systems and they have good data connections within their states, once somebody crosses a border, it's really hard to know what happened. So if you're an educator and you're wanting to know if your students are successful after the fact, or a training provider, and you want to know whether or not people enter the workforce, it becomes very difficult if that workforce happens to be across a state border. Even though that border could be hundreds of yards away from you, once they hit that sort of line on a map, it makes administrative data connections difficult. The focus on the northeastern area really has a lot to do with the fact that there are very high levels of migration across most of the northeastern states. At least from what I've been able to turn up, most of the states in this region have a difficulty identifying where their graduates go from college, anywhere from basically a little over half to sometimes even uh, maybe less than three quarters in terms of being able to stay in state and actually know what they do, what kind of a position they get into, if they can figure that out, but at least wages and sustainable employment. So people do move around a lot. Employers in the region don't stick to just lines on a map. They recruit across states. You've got opportunities for people with collaborative efforts amongst the states. You've got opportunities for people to go to college in different states. And then the question is, what happens when they come back? And so by looking across these state lines and connecting data, we're better able to fill in the gaps to know from a policy perspective how our programs are working and what the impacts are having both on our local economies within a state, but also from a regional perspective. It's also helpful, I think, to be able to think regionally in terms of employment needs and being able to position people for success later in life. Allison, next slide, please. All right, so one of the questions that you might want to know is where do graduates go if they leave the state? And so if you're in one of these states in the Northeast, the majority do seem to stay in the Northeast area. There is some migration to other parts of the country from what we can tell, but there is a lot of just state to state jumping around. So questions might be, do they stay if you've got out-of-state students, if you're thinking about tuition policies for your in-state colleges and what to do about out-of-state students who come in? One of the big questions might be, do they actually stay and contribute to the economy? Or does an out-of-state student who comes and gets an education in your state actually go back home, or do they potentially go to another state? Migration literature says if you're willing to move, you're willing to move again. So those are really important questions to think about when you consider the costs of working with out-of-state folks, as well as the benefit of what you might be able to gain. The other question might be about programs that you might offer and whether or not they're helping to keep people within your state and connect them with good, solid careers, or whether they're having to go elsewhere. Some of the factors that might influence whether or not somebody stays or not might have more to do with the employment factors of what's going on, the need, the sort of market side of this equation in terms of where the jobs might be and where the earnings might be. If you can't connect across states, you don't really understand what's going on. You might be able to go to, there's some great sources out there. You can look at some census data on migration. Post-secondary employment outcomes work is great. It tells you about where folks might go and a little bit about what they might earn, but you can't really dig very deep with those. So one of the other things that you can do by bringing folks together is you can learn from one another. And so in this cluster of states, everybody is dealing with most of the same kinds of problems when you think about migration. It is heavy in many of these states. And some states are attracting more people, and some states are actually losing more people than they're gaining. So from a state policy perspective, it's good to know what happens. If you're limited to just looking at, the people that are within your state, it's really hard to know how successful your programs are, both for the constituents that are completing them, but also for your funders, for your policymakers who are helping to pay for those programs. So by connecting across state data, you can get a much better picture on the real impact of these programs. Allison? So what Allison mentioned is, what does this really add? Like I said, many of these states have very strong data capacities in state. The thing that it adds is it adds the ability to dig in deeper to the out-of-state data. There are ways, National Student Clearinghouse, for example, to find out if your high school graduates are going to college in another state. I mentioned the Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes Report, very strong effort that looks across the country at whether or not people are getting into employment. We've got BLS has projects. There's Swiss with the Department of Labor that has projects. So there are ways to get some information about people that leave the state. The problem is that it's generally fairly high-level descriptive information. It can tell you the what. So it might tell you how many people leave and get a job. You might even be able to learn some kind of median wage or maybe even some quartiles, but it doesn't let you dig much deeper than that. So if you want to be able to disaggregate, if you want to be able to drill down into this data to not just understand the what of how many people are leaving, but dig a little closer into the why are they leaving, or is a particular program. Many of the states in the Northeast corridor have programs designed to connect college students with local employers. Okay, well, are those people who participate in that program more likely to stay in state, or are they just as likely to leave as anybody else? Most of these sources that you can get the surface level data won't let you dig in quite that deep. And even just disaggregation, or their particular race ethnic groups or gender clusters or anything else with different careers that are being impacted. A lot of these sources, they just don't let you get in because all you get is tabular data. The project that we're talking about actually gets access across the states that participate to micro level data. So it's not identifiable. The identifiers are scrubbed, but it does give you the ability to actually run analyses. So if you wanted to add program participation to one of the analyses that you're doing, it's as simple as adding it to the code. You don't have to go through a process of trying to get some third party to do something for you. So you do get the ability to dig in if you want to do statistical analysis. If you want to not just know why, if you have a series of variables that you want to know how related they are in terms of migration decisions, whether people stay or go, you could run a regression because it's micro level data. It's very hard to do that with any other source that's available. So the main point of the work here is that we have a region of the country that has a lot of migration. We know education to workforce is very important to these factors. We know that those are important to your policymakers and those of you who are providing education and training programs. And we know it's important to your constituents about what happens to people after the fact and ensuring that they're successful, whether they stay close to home or whether they move across a border. So the main idea of what we can add to this is that it adds a lot of levels of complexity for whatever you want to look at. And we are primarily talking about post-secondary to workforce. However, since this is a project that's created by the states that come together, there's the ability to bring more data to the table. If you want to look at maybe somebody doesn't show up in college, perhaps they show up in another state's apprenticeship program or a training provider, and whether or not those folks stay or whether or not they wind up getting a position somewhere else. The idea is you can look at it in different ways. When we think about earnings, one of the things that I also encourage folks to think about is that just knowing a median age doesn't always, or median earnings of a group of people, graduates or completers or anything else. It tells you something, but it doesn't tell you necessarily everything. That doesn't tell you how long it took somebody to find a position. It doesn't tell you whether or not, if you look at 3 years out or 5 years out or something like that, it doesn't tell you if their employment is sustained for the long term. And when we look at things like medians, it also doesn't tell you whether or not people are earning a livable wage. And so we have a lot of factors, particularly with high cost of living in some parts of the country, where you want to know whether or not earnings are actually able to sustain somebody. And so that's where we have opportunities when we work with microdata to actually dig in a lot deeper and understand a lot more about what's going on. Now, the vision for this initiative is to be able to strengthen the education and workforce data partnerships across northeastern states. We do this through collaboration, through some shared learning, and through evidence generation. So what is provided, this does not cost you anything to participate if your state chooses to participate. We do provide technical assistance. There are peer learning opportunities to bring states together to talk about visioning and what are the questions that you all are interested in asking and into diving in. States have the opportunity to ask their own questions too. It's not just one collective, but we do think that some shared questions are a good idea. We get the opportunities for cross-state collaboration. We know this part of the country has a lot of cross-state collaboration already, but this gives you all an opportunity to do it at a micro level with data. And then the goal of all of this work is to provide better evidence to support policy and practice in your states. So data exercises are relatively useless unless they actually result in some useful information to help you all make better decisions. So what makes this different? This is to complement what goes on. We're not suggesting using this instead of your longitudinal data system for local needs or anything like that. This is to add a layer of information that really it's hard to get anywhere else, if not impossible. Our goal is by bringing these things together, we can have some shared resources, and we, meaning Coleridge, can provide some support for standardizing data and some other things. so that we can reduce the burden on you all if you wanted to try to do these things on your own or connecting from state to state. So we can do this centrally. We can reduce some of the burden, we can provide technical assistance, and we can provide an infrastructure for you all to use so that you can actually gain things. If one of the states creates an interesting analytic and other states want to use it, it should be able to work just fine. So you can share resources and actually get more out of it than just what you put into it. We also want to create a framework for data connections that lives beyond this initiative. This is a grant-funded initiative. Grant-funded initiatives don't go on forever, unfortunately. However, if we set this up right, we are going to continue to pursue funding opportunities and make sure that we have a way of, not just giving you all a taste of what can happen when you bring data together. Our goal is for this to be able to exist in the long term. And so we want to set up a successful framework that will allow that to happen. Next slide.
You, Charles. Well, I would love to share a little bit about the Eastern States Summit that's coming up in September. They're in Hartford, Connecticut. So we're really excited to bring this conversation and have it in person in a day and a half gathering for some select leaders to have this conversation about really what the collaboration could look like. So it's not a traditional conference in the sense that we're going to be presenting a lot of information to you, but it's designed to foster that collaboration amongst state leaders and really looking at leadership across a variety of domains such as education, workforce, labor, human services, research, philanthropy, and really other public sector domains, because we do recognize that also that transition of education to workforce isn't always reflective of all of the different inputs that your state might be considering as priority influences and how that trajectory plays out for your residents. So the emphasis is about using that administrative data to really improve policy programs and outcomes. So it's a place to really start this conversation or continue it. Participants at the summit will have the opportunity to really start learning from peer states, but also sharing and meeting other folks that are also having maybe similar questions or have tackled similar questions that might have some ideas and insights they can share already with you. But really about sharing those innovative approaches. Why recreate the wheel when somebody's done it already and you can learn from that and benefit? So that's really a place that we can start exploring that. We can explore governance models and how different ways that the states can work together. And maybe you've already had experiences of working with another state cross borders, or maybe this is the first time you're exploring this conversation, but we'd have a place where we can really dive in and talk about that together. And the idea, again, is just to have that relationship, that network, that community around these initiatives and these priorities that you're facing within your states. And it's meant to be a practical application. It's meant to be active. We want you to be able to leave with these new ideas and new connections, but really those concrete next steps, where you're headed for the next phase of your work, whether that's within the grant-funded initiative or not. So to give you kind of an idea of what the agenda is looking like and what you could expect during this summit, the first day of the summit is a full day. It's meant to be focused on learning and resource and relationship building. We'll start with a keynote of sorts where Connecticut's going to welcome us to their state. We'll have some state leaders talking about cross-sector data collaboration, and sharing practical examples, some right there in the eastern states, and then some outside of there and what the work has looked like. And we'll follow with sessions on topics such as governance, infrastructure, organizational readiness, as well as emerging workforce data practices like enhanced wage records, which I feel like I have those conversations almost every day about enhanced wage records. So we definitely want to make sure we're incorporating that into our conversation. And throughout that day, participants will engage in interactive workshops, collaborative learning sessions. It's meant to be very hands-on so that we can help identify challenges that you're facing, explore those successful approaches, and really begin developing priorities for your future work. And then participants in the grant-funded initiative, if you are interested in that and want to explore that further, we do have a half day on the second day that's really shifting from learning to planning. So this is, again, taking all of that information that you're going through on day one and really coming up with that really concrete next steps. So this is where state teams would work together to translate those discussions into actionable roadmaps, identify where technical assistance would be most beneficial for you, and what that would look like. What kind of technical assistance would aid your capacity so that you can do the work that you want to do. And then also define the next steps for strengthening those education to workforce outcome data partnerships. So we've intentionally built a lot of networking opportunities throughout both days because we know some of those most valuable ideas do happen and emerge through conversations with peers that are sometimes informal conversations that you chat about during a break, but also some facilitated conversations throughout so that you can really sometimes commiserate on similar challenges, but hopefully also talk about opportunities to how to tackle those together or with one another or for the future of how you might be able to come together. So I would encourage you to, rather than thinking about the summit as a standalone event or as a traditional conference where you'll come and just sit down and have a lot of information dumped on you, this is really a spot for a key milestone in this regional conversation that's happening that I know that a lot of the states talk about these migrations across state lines, and hopefully it'll be a really good conversation to have all together. So to give you an idea of how this kind of fits together within the larger conversation, the webinar, this one here, this conversation is just the beginning of the conversation. The Ascendium initiative, that Ascendium-funded initiative, provides that ongoing support and collaboration. And the summit provides a place to really deepen the relationships, engage in conversations and ideas, and shape what that future is going to look like. This is your initiative. We are simply here to try and provide resources to support the work that you want to do. So we want to make sure that your voices and your input are what's shaping this work. And we're just simply here providing some financial support, some technical assistance, and a facility where you can get that accomplished. Really all together, this webinar, the Ascendium-funded initiative, the Eastern States Summit, it's to create that foundation for a stronger regional community of practice. So lots of information, lots of different things. We really do encourage you to join this conversation, whether you want to explore it, you want to look at how you can expand, or you're just in general curious about it. We would love for you to stay engaged, ask questions. You can ask them here. In a little bit, I'll share some additional resources in the chat, such as email addresses and websites that you can go to as well. But I do want to turn this over to Charles. We have a few minutes. We have plenty because I speak fast, apparently, for questions and answers.
Well, first things first, I don't think we actually introduced what Coleridge is as I'm thinking about this, Allison. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with Coleridge, we're a nonprofit organization. Our name used to be the Coleridge Initiative, and we've shortened it just to Coleridge. But our objective is to work with agencies and states to bring data together to make better informed policy decisions. And so we help to support a lot of longitudinal data systems processes. We actually, one of the things that we do, which is related very much to this project, is we support states in bringing data together in a central location to work across state lines or across regional lines. And so we do work with multi-state initiatives. We worked with Kentucky, which if you're in the longitudinal data systems space, KY Stats is something I created a long time ago before I went to work for the federal government, where I've been in the longitudinal data systems grant program for about the last 11 years. So what we do at Coleridge is we provide a safe space for states and agencies to come together to analyze data in a secure way, with lots of security added on top of that, a lot of supports and a lot of technology. So that's what Coleridge does. Ascendium Education has funded us to identify a cluster of states that want to look at a region and bring their data together and work under a shared governance structure and be able to do some deep dive analytics, be able to learn things they can't learn any other way. And so that's basically what we're doing. Is this effort is largely around recruiting states to participate in that. And so the focus right now has been on the Northeast, just because we know the high migration rates makes this a little more useful for the folks up there. So, with that being said, that short summary, I do want to ask you all a few questions, because I'm not sure. I do recognize a few names in the attendee list, and I want to be sure that y'all have an opportunity to kind of tell us a little bit about why you're there. What are you curious about? What could we help you learn more about in terms of either this initiative or in terms of the regional conference that we're getting ready to have in Connecticut? So, as a group, or collectively, you can feel free to come off mute and ask us questions. You can type things into the chat box, and we're happy to answer those as well, and keep an eye on those. But one of the questions I've got is, what was it about the potential cross-state data connections that interested any of you all in coming today to learn more about this process? Let's see. Will there be a way to attend or gain information from the conference virtually? We have a couple questions in the Q&A. And chat's disabled, and you cannot unmute yourselves. So, Allison, can we fix that? All right. In terms of attending virtually, no, this is an in-person only event. All right, Allison, is the chat unmutable or mutable or?
I'm, you know, we're seeing. Well, the Q&A function is working. So we can provide some comments in there if you would like. I apologize.
All right, I guess put your questions in the Q&A box. Let me see if I
Yes.
can.
Oh, let's see. Attendees can chat with everyone.
What does a
Well,
state team to attend the summit participate in the respect look like to you? Who are the critical representatives? I think in terms of the state teams that might participate, ideally we want to include folks that are part of the organizations that have data that they might want to bring to the table. So that would, at a very basic level, we're talking post-secondary and then hopefully workforce. Meaning, and when we talk about workforce, we're mostly thinking about UI records, unemployment insurance, because it's wage records that that most people will want to connect to. I think a state team would be balanced. I do think that the end goal of all of this is to support policies and practice. And so I don't see this as something that's an exclusively a data person conversation. I think knowing the value out of getting this work done and the questions that it can answer tends to a broader conversation within your state. So I think a team ideally would be balanced. You'd have people from agencies, preferably people who work in some of these programs, that might have a sense of how they operate and what the questions are that need to be answered. That's my take on it. Allison, what do you think?
I agree. I think having someone who gets in there and works with the data is very important to be a part of the conversation, especially in the future. But those that are looking at the broad perspective of the policy and the procedures in general and those larger initiatives, as well as how it's implemented and how it works, is a really great, well-rounded conversation. Typically, we recommend at least two people from an agency to participate, because then you have those two perspectives and each of you get to kind of hear your own ideas. But if you want to bring more, we're definitely open to having conversations for more. One thing I forgot to mention, I do believe, is that we do have travel support available to participants for this Eastern States Summit. So we do also offer some support there for some of your participants.
Yeah, and the caveat that that's not everybody. You put in an application, and we decide there'll be a limit to how many per state there are, but we'll fund everybody we can possibly fund if travel's involved. One of the things I wanted to mention too is to make sure you all understand is your state can participate even if you don't come to the conference. The conference is really there to do more deep dives and talk more about this program that's been funded. But if you can't make it, that doesn't exclude your organization or your agency from being part of this at any stretch. We have many touch points, many opportunities to have conversations and be part of these things. So if you can't attend the conference, we can absolutely work with that. One of the slides Allison's going to show you all has contact information for me and her. And that kind of goes back to another question too, is how do you know if folks from your state are attending? Reach out to us directly and let us know where you're from, and we'll try to get the information. We're just starting to get people signing up for the conference, so we don't have a lot set there yet. This is one of the activities we're doing to help people understand why we're doing this regional conference and what they might get out of it. So we're happy to answer any questions about what agencies are represented or anything else if you reach out after this. In terms of another question from Teresa Foster, is this effort something parts of a state can participate in if the state does not have an SLDS that cross agencies already participate in? Absolutely. One of the things that we do is we meet people where they are. If you have a longitudinal data system that already connects data together, we can work with you through that. But if you don't, and we have many projects that do this, we can work with individual agencies. That's the ADRF, which is our system that we use, Administrative Data Research Facility. We can work directly with individual agencies to bring data from those agencies together and connect it together and connect it with agencies from other states. All of this is done, caveat always, under a shared governance structure. We have very strict rules about what we can and can't do, about what can and can't be connected, and who can access those data. So states are always in control of their own data, but you don't have to have a strong longitudinal data system or even any longitudinal data system to participate in this project if you're with one of these states. From your work across states, what administrative data streams like procurement cycles, active DUAs, or reporting friction serve as the strongest proxy indicators that a region has the operational plumbing to lead complex cross-agency or cross-state initiatives? That's a great question. There are usually a couple factors, one of which is state capacity from a governance perspective. The biggest thing that gets in the way of most of these projects are governance related. They're agreements. States, they want shared data or they want to link data across agencies, but they don't want someone else to receive their data to be able to link it. So it's an issue of navigating the waters that everybody is comfortable, that all the rules are followed, all the laws are followed, and that people are still able to get the information that they need at the end, which is usually not access to personally identifiable information. It's access to statistical information that they can use. But usually if a state has a strong governance process, if they've already got examples where they connect within state from agency to agency successfully, it's a great indicator that we're going to be able to work with them to look at that across states with other agencies. How frequently are the touch points with the states and cross-state partners in terms of getting deliverables? Seems like it might be focused on the state pace of progress with the added value of cross-state collaboration. We will have to come up with a cadence that works. Once we get the states identified online, we're going to have conversations with them about capacity and what is reasonable. The work itself is going to have to be broken into different blocks, which might include different people from those states. We will have a group that works on data sharing agreements and governance structures. And that is likely to be different people than the technical teams that come together to talk about standardizing some of the data fields that might be needed. And then there may also be a different group that we need to bring together to really think about the vision for what are the questions that you all want to be able to answer that cross state lines. Sometimes the data people are not the right people to answer that questions. They know the questions that come in, but they may not see the long-term impact of these data on programs. So usually the vision part is more leadership, more program level. The data sharing agreement technically tends to be more the legal staff, the people that write contracts, work with that, understand privacy considerations within your states. And then the data folks tend to work on the meat and potatoes parts of let's make this thing happen. And so how do we get the data we've got into the format for the data that we need to connect it together? Mm-hmm. In terms of the frequency, it's not going to be weekly or anything like that. I would expect some of these committees will go on for a while and then they will disband. Visioning will be in probably the first parts of this, and then they will just come back periodically. Once the agreements are in place, the data sharing agreement or MOU group governance groups will they'll disband for a while. They'll probably come back at different points as we just do touch points. The data folks will be involved, and then we'll have an analytic group at some point that comes in that actually utilizes all these data tools that everybody is working together on. And so some of those groups might meet monthly, some of them might meet quarterly. It's the impact is not going to be huge for everybody. We know you all have full-time jobs, and you're all probably working about 150% effort right now. So what we want to do is to give you everything we can to get the most out of this possible with the least amount of added effort to your plate. All right. Do we have any other questions?
See one more pop in.
How do we come back and tell you we are interested? All right. This is not a timeshare sales pitch. So we're not expecting anybody to sign on the bottom line today. Do you want to go ahead and skip to the next slide, Allison?
Absolutely.
A couple of things to know. We are doing active outreach to the states. So we do have contacts, but we know there's people in the states that might be interested that we don't know. That's one of the reasons why we're starting to do more open things like this. So it's possible we'll reach out to you. You can always reach out to us directly and either contact Allison or myself to ask for more information, ask to be, part of the conversation. Most likely for the folks that sign up for this webinar, and if we do any others, we will send some more information out about the summit, just some reminders if you want to get in touch with us or attend, how to get the information that you need for any of that to happen. We do have our email addresses are also listed in the chat box. If you just want to copy that and paste it into your email client, that will work as well. But we are happy to continue the conversation. This is a commitment. If you choose to participate in the multi-state project, there is some level of commitment there. There's work on our side, there's work on state side, but we're happy to answer any questions. I think it's a good opportunity. I think trying to do this individually, if you were in a state and connect across state lines, is very difficult. One of the things that Coleridge brings, in addition to having it's a FedRAMP medium or moderate secure facility, which means we've met one of the highest standards that the government recognizes for data security, higher than any of the state systems that I've ever seen. So, I mean, we have a lot of the technical side, but what we also bring to the table is we've worked on many multi-state projects. And so we have contracts people that understand non-disclosure agreement or NDAs. We have folks that work with MOUs and getting states comfortable to where we can bring these data together in a way that protects everything that needs to be protected, but still allows analytic capacity for the people that have, granted access to use the data. So we've done this before and we know how to do it. And so I think that we could certainly do this a lot easier than you all can get if you were to try to do it on your own. And so our objective, and that's why Ascendium funded this, is to offer this out there as something to help you. So everything has to be state driven. We don't have a research agenda we're trying to meet. We're not going to direct the questions. They really have to be state driven. And we're just here to support the states that participate and to help make sure that this is successful and that everybody gets what they need to make better policies. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that's really all that we had prepared for you all today. Like Charles mentioned, there our emails are on the screen. They're in the chat box for you. Uh, we will share out more information about the Eastern State Summit, about the initiative in general. So if you do want those details, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll make sure that we get you everything that you might need in order to make your decisions and choose with how you want to participate and what level. But we do want to thank you so much for spending a part of your day today with us. And we appreciate your interest. And we really do look forward to working together with you to strengthen the education to workforce data partnerships there and really improve those outcomes for learners and workers across your regions. So thank you so much. And we will look forward to staying in touch with you all.
Yeah, Alice and I will stay online for a few minutes just in case anybody else has any questions. But for the rest of you all, thanks very much. And any questions